pretend to talk about anything that happened in New York between, like 1970 and 1990 if you don't read this, because really,
yeah, shit. Right. That's the quote of the book. All right, we can wrap this up now. That's done. Okay, that's it. We're done.
I never saw the Cro-Mags. I know you from the Stimulators.
That blew my mind when you told me that you saw us play.
I remembered, standing out front of Max's Kansas City in like 1980, 1981?
79, 80, because they were closed.
And trying to get in and who's this fucking 13-year-old kid who's just walking through walls, getting served, gliding by the doorman. It was like, oh, that's Harley Flanagan, man. He's the drummer for the Sinners. Yeah, well, how come he gets, how have the laws of the universe changed that allow this kid to move in a grown-up world? And I think that's one of the many things that's interesting about the book is here you were at age, 13, 14, and earlier.
Well, when I started playing with them, I was like 12, 13, 12. I didn't want it to just be my story. I wanted people to be able to read it and get an idea of what New York was like. Like almost like a Huck Finn type of a story of the Lower East Side in the 80s. Like, what it was like being a kid and all that madness. It really was madness, dude.
Almost nobody had a childhood like you, though. I mean, really, almost no one. You wrote a book at age, 7?
Yeah.
With a foreword by Allen Ginsburg?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that happened to me, too. No, actually, it didn't. I think my first comment to you after I read the first draft of the book was, look, the person who, in the film version, version of this book, whoever plays your mom is the one getting the Oscar. That's the juiciest role for, in my view. And clearly this was a pivotal, really important figure, not just in your life, but I mean in everything that was going on. And I think, I guess your mom and your aunt as well. These were two rather extraordinary women who, for better or worse, put you into some pretty amazing, an amazing orbit.
Yeah, they did. Not for nothing, man. My mom would be so, she died just over a year ago, but she would be so fucking thrilled to see me and you talking about this right now. She was a big fan of yours, and when I told her that I met you, she was like, oh, wow. Of course, she was already pretty sick at that point, but she'd be really proud right now, dude. And when you said that to me, that I didn't really include a lot about my mom and my childhood, because a lot of it was really hard for me to swallow. And I didn't want to sound like I was dogging her in any way, like she put me on this fucking roller coaster ride, which in a lot of ways she did, but, to be fair, she was a flower child, a 60s hippie, I guess her idea of educating me and stuff was exposing me to the world as much as she could. And, my mom got me the Sex Pistols record, like, when it first came out. She was fucking cool. She went into a record store in London and she's like, what are the kids listening to now? Like, what's the current shit? And the dude cracked out the Pistols' first album and the Damned's first album and, like, some stiff 45s, like Reckless Eric and Nick Lowe and whatever other bullshit. And so it's like my mom kind of, in a way, yeah, I owe a lot to her.
I think, my dad was in the music industry. He worked for Columbia Records back in the, I guess, late 60s and sort of the golden age, Clive Davis era, 70s. And to his credit, he worked in the classical music division. Both parents were heavily into opera and classical music, but they were very, very supportive of any time I expressed any interest in any kind of music. As long as it was music, whether they liked it or not, they were supportive of it. So that was, it's something I'm grateful about. And it's, my dad would drive me to the Fillmore East when I was 12, 13. I mean, he wasn't leaving me alone there. I mean, he'd let me and my friends go in and he'd pick us up afterwards and, get us home. So it was hardly a street kid. I didn't have a childhood like yours, but I was exposed to a lot of music early on, and my parents were encouraging of that.
It's funny because, you know, you were talking about how your family were always exposing you to music, and obviously mine did. I gotta say, sadly, I really didn't expose my kids to as much music as I probably should have, but it was more out of fear, honestly. Like, I had a lot of great experiences, but I fucking grew up so fast, and I had so many bad experiences that I didn't want them to get the bug. Like, I honestly felt like, you know, jiu-jitsu and MMA is fucking way safer, man. I way have to be like pro fighters than like pro musicians.
In Los Angeles a while back, and I find myself at a dinner party with Josh Homme and his wife Brody Dahl. Josh is from Queens of the Stone Age and Eagles of Death Metal, and then Crooked Vultures and Iggy's band. He's had like a million bands. He's a good friend, and his wife Brody Dahl was I guess in Spinneret and is now in Distillers, I believe. And I just sort of casually mentioned, you know, my daughter's jiu-jitsu instructor is Harley Flanagan. Is that not awesome? And they both said, no way. We named our child after Harley. So they named their kid after you. I think this is the nice thing about like music nerds. Like they can be super, they can be super annoying, and generally speaking, I mean, I'm guessing, I'm not a musician, but you know, everybody loves your first album that nobody listens to, and then the second one comes out, and like, you know, more people buy it, and then all the music nerds who like your first album, no, they're not good anymore. There's that instinct. But the fact is, those same people are the ones who, when you go to your Wikipedia page, I'm gonna guess that they pretty much, somebody made the effort to get it kind of right. Or if you look up New York hardcore, I'm guessing your name is in there somewhere.
Yeah,
I mean, they got like, you know, we did a show with a while back with Kool Herc, Africa Bambaataa, and Melly Mel in the Bronx. None of these guys got paid. They basically created the entire soundtrack for the world, whether it's a McDonald's commercial, you know, a kids show, you know, any nation on earth, hip hop is pretty much the dominant sort of soundtrack, you know, universally aspired to everywhere. These three guys never really got paid, and I think I said to Herc, you know, have you ever walked into like some fast food chicken joint, you know, at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you look across the room, and you know, there's you know, Bambaataa, and there's Melly Mel, and you all kind of look at each other from 3 different tables and say, you know, what do you feel? Like, dude, we got fucked? No, he said, look, if you look up hip hop, any authoritative, credible study of hip hop will absolutely acknowledge their contribution. So that counts for a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not getting written out of history. So you're saying, look, people do remember, and they do know, and there will be people arguing about it, you know, 50 years from now. You know, that ain't going to go away. It's independent of you. It happened. People remember it. People will talk about it. People will play the records, and this, you can't fuck that up. or unfuck it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you can't unfuck it up. No, yeah, man, it's true what you say. It's just it's weird still because I grew up before all this internet shit, you know, as the youth. So I still haven't really acclimated to that shit. Like even Facebook and Twitter and all this stuff. Like I have a difficult time even interacting with it appropriately. I get too personal because I come from that generation, and plus I was into punk rock, which was always very personal. You know, it was like the fans, the band, and the people in the audience were always kind of the same people. It wasn't like...
No, they literally were.
They were. It wasn't like Kiss, who's on stage, and it's like, there's the band, and we're the people over here. I always hated that shit. Like, I was never into arena rock or whatever the fuck it was, but, you know, I grew up on punk rock, so I still have that nature of being personal with people, and boy, that fucking is so doesn't work in this age.
I think what people seem to forget or don't understand or should understand is that nobody bought those records then. All of them were broke. I mean, nobody was making fucking money. The Ramones never made money. Richard Hell and the Voidoids, one of my favorite bands of like
one of my neighbors.
all time, of course. Probably my favorite guitarist ever in the history of rock and roll, Robert Quine. I mean, those guys, and I think we understood that then. That basically, all of the fans of this band are pretty much in this room now, and they're never going to get any airplay, and this is it. So it's kind of amazing. All these years later, you will go walk into some hipster bar in New Orleans or France or Japan, and they will be playing Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and you can find 38 different versions of Gimme Danger off of Funhouse now, because a lot of people have rediscovered it. I mean, there are many more listeners, I'm sure now, of the good old stuff than there were then.
Yeah.
I think the good old days are overrated if you want to be honest about it. I mean, they weren't so great for me. All those musicians, half of them were being supported by their stripper girlfriends. It was like,
the joke.
Johnny Thunders, I remember, he's headlining at the Ritz, and they got to go wake him up, and he's sleeping in the back of a station wagon down the street. They're like, go get Johnny, he's late for the show. Bang, bang, bang. It's fucked up.
What's a musician without a girlfriend?
Broke.
Homeless.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
So that was the joke of my youth.
Yeah.
But you know what? I didn't start playing music because I was trying to become successful. That's the whole difference between what we were doing, I think, is, a lot of the people who got into, whatever, my experiences in hardcore music, whatever, we didn't do that shit because we ever had any hopes or ambitions of becoming successful or big playing, and to me, it was like, I didn't think we were going to ever make it out of New York or the East Coast when I was first putting the Cro-Mags together. I didn't imagine that we were going to put out an album and we were going to actually get it signed and of course completely fucked over. And then later bands actually were starting bands because they had that in mind. They wanted to, be successful and this and that. But that wasn't the motivation then. So if I didn't make the money, fuck it. It really wasn't. That wasn't the goal. I'm a musician. I just can't help it, man. I'm up at night 2, 3 in the morning because I can't sleep because I have riffs that I have to figure out how to play them, and I have time signatures that are driving me crazy. I'm like, oh, this beat is so, and it's it borderlines on psychosis. I mean, it's.
Well, look, I think the original Cro-Mags had a similar effect. It's a similar story to the Ramones in that people said, the Ramones would play, Minnesota, Minneapolis back in the day, or, Cleveland, or, out there on the road, and 50 people would show up, but every single one of them, after they saw the Ramones, would form a band, and I suspect Cro-Mags had that same kind of electrifying effect on a lot of people. It's like, oh, I want to do that, I can do it.
I hate to say because I want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but it's fucking true though, man. We fucking blew a lot of people away. And of course, what the band turned into is embarrassing and everything, but when we were the shit, man, I gotta say that you really couldn't fuck with us, man. We would have gone on stage and smoked any fucking buddy. So, to see it turn into kind of a joke and that hurts a little bit, but
that's the story of rock and
exactly.
roll, isn't it? You end up
up
doing some iteration of the original band, probably not with the original people in it. Ends up playing, county fairs next to Dokken and Slayer. But the former bass player from Dokken,
exactly,
and a bunch of guys. That's
fuck it.
All roads lead to that. I mean, I think nothing is pure.
Yeah, at a certain point, shit has to get ridiculous.
I mean, it's sort of. It kind of always happens that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. And there's always, beefs between the two band members, or it's the fucking everything. It's always got.
But I think from my observations, the rules of rock and roll always lead to certain universal truths. The bad girlfriend. You know,
yes. Every band has a Yoko Ono. You know, there's every band.
You know, the lead singer syndrome.
Yes. Well, because they don't play an instrument, so they just, you know. Yeah. Now, lead singer syndrome is real.
So, do you think, is there a moral to the story? Like the book?
To the book? You know, for me, it was really just about getting some sort of closure. You know, really. I mean, when I started writing it, it was actually, I started writing it in like the 90s when I was probably at my most depraved drug state where I was just out of my mind doing everything wrong imaginable. And I was like, and at that point I had already kind of come to terms with what you were saying, how, you know, people are gonna know about you forever. So I was like, you know what? Chances are pretty good I'm not gonna fucking live too long the way I'm living. So I need to start writing some of this shit down, because if I don't, some other asshole's gonna tell my story when I do fucking drop dead, or when I do OD or get hit by a bus or whatever the fuck happens. And they're gonna get every fucking thing wrong. They're gonna tell some self-serving bullshit story, like I'll get one, like my guitarist or some shit writing a book, Harley this, and taking credit for every fucking thing I did. Or I'll get some asshole journalist or some fucking, so I was like, you know, I better write this shit down. And when I first started working on it, like I said, I was really fucking up. So it was initially gonna be called The Longest Suicide Note Ever Written. That was the initial working title, because I was sure I wasn't going to make it more than another couple of years at most. I mean, I had to cut like 100 stories out for every one story I left in.
There are so many sort of historic touchstones in the book that, you know, make it, you know, I think interesting to anybody. I mean, the characters who were, I mean, you took for granted as neighbors or just, you know, sort of walk-ons in your life, a pretty extraordinary cultural history of New York in and of themselves. And just the pictures alone of you with like Warhol and Harry and Joe Strummer and, you know, just that one night that I saw the Stimulators. I mean, it was a rather extraordinary bill of music all on one night. I mean, you'll never see that.
No,
you'll never see that again.
No, definitely not.
I mean, half of them are dead.
Yeah, well, yeah. That was actually funny, that one picture that you tweeted with me and Lemmy and Wurzel and Stiv, and you're like, sole survivor. Because like when I saw that picture, it kind of gave me the creeps. I was like, oh fuck, everybody in that picture's dead except for me, man. Like, what am I next? And you're like, you flipped it. You're like, sole survivor, Harley Flanagan. And I'm like, you know something? I fucking am. When I was initially working on my book, I was like, damn, this is like a fucking cross between like Clockwork Orange and Spinal Tap. Like, this fucking book is just like the ridiculous stupidness and then just the extreme violence and drugs.
I thought it was terrific. It's an amazing story with amazing characters, and it's set in a time that I don't know that I'm nostalgic about, but it's set in a time and around the same events, the same landscape that, you know, if nothing else, I survived. It's an important period. It was an important period of my life. It shaped a lot of who I am. It had been a long time since I've been reminded of a lot of those places and characters. And, you know, I think the book does that really, really well. It takes you back to a very, very different world that people tend to over-romanticize. People's perception of what it was like back then is so completely different than the way it was. And I think, you know, your book, in addition to being an amazing personal story, for me captured a time and a place that still means a lot to me.